Still looking for a natural way to relieve aches and discomfort? Introducing Cornbread Hemp's CBD Gummies. Cornbread Hemp's CBD Gummies are made to help you feel better, whether it's stress, discomfort, or just needing a little relaxation. They only use the best part of the hemp plant, the flower, for the purest and most potent CBD. Formulated to help relieve discomfort, stress, and sleeplessness. All products are third-party lab-tested and USDA organic to ensure safety and purity. Right now, TBD listeners can save 30% on their first order. Just head to cornbreadhemp.com/TBD and use code TBD at checkout. That's cornbreadhemp.com/TBD and use code TBD.
This episode is brought to you by State Farm. Checking off the boxes on your to-do list is a great feeling. And when it comes to checking off coverage, a State Farm agent can help you choose an option that's right for you. Whether you prefer talking in person, on the phone, or using the award-winning app, it's nice knowing you have help finding coverage that best fits your needs. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
I don't know that any description I can give of Monday's White House announcement about autism can fully capture it.
Effective immediately, the FDA will be notifying physicians that the use of let's see how we say that. Acetaminophen. Is that okay? Which is basically commonly known as Tylenol. During pregnancy can be associated with a very increased risk of autism.
I want to be clear that the link the president is making is unproven.
So taking Tylenol is not good. All right, I'll say it. It's not good. For this reason, they are strongly recommending that women limit Tylenol use during pregnancy unless medically necessary. That's, for instance, in cases of extremely high fever, that you feel you can't tough it out, you can't do it. I guess there's that.
I asked Dan Diamond to listen to that clip with me. Dan covers the White House for the Washington Post. And before that, he covered healthcare for a decade.
There's nothing like this conference that happened on Monday. Some of the stuff during the coronavirus pandemic came kind of close when President Trump was talking about unproven treatments for coronavirus. But here he was both inveighing against a very common over-the-counter pain reliever that lots of people count on, including people in my family, and then also kind of double-barreled raising all these unproven questions about vaccines, spouting rhetoric that anti-vaccine activists love to hear from the President of the United States at the White House. So I don't think anybody has ever seen anything like that. And I've talked to people who call it the most dangerous public health announcement in modern U.S. history.
Yeah, what was the broader reaction in the public health and medical community?
Shock, horror. And that's not just the public health community, Lizzie. I talked to Republicans, people who served under President Trump the first time, or even a few people who are in his government now, Republicans on Capitol Hill. None of them are happy with what unfolded on Monday. I think the only person or people who might be happy are President Trump, his health secretary, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and some of their supporters.
But of course, the president has probably the biggest megaphone in the world.
He has a core following who trust him over what an acronym agency like FDA or CDC or CMS, agencies that did come out with some guidance and statements on Tylenol that were much more measured than President Trump saying, don't take it, tough it out. I don't think we can put a number on the people who are going to walk away from Monday and change their behavior, but it seems probable, if not certain, that some will.
Today on the show, unpacking Donald Trump and RFK Jr.'s obsession with autism, how it started, and where we go from here. I'm Lizzie O'Leary, and you're listening to What Next TBD, a show about technology, power, and how the future will be determined. Stick around.
At Sierra, discover great deals on top brand workout gear, like high-quality walking shoes, which might lead to another discovery.
40,000 steps, baby. Who's on top now, Karen?
You've taken the office step challenge a step too far. Don't worry, though. Sierra also has yoga gear. It might be a good place to find your zen. Discover top brands at unexpectedly low prices. Sierra, let's get moving.
This episode is brought to you by Saks Fifth Avenue. Saks Fifth Avenue makes it easy to get creative with your personal style and find the best arrivals for fall. Whether you're trying out the latest fashion trends or curating a closet that stands the test of time, Saks has you covered. Saks makes shopping feel personal. Their trusted in-store stylists are there to guide and inspire you, helping you find pieces that fit every aspect of your lifestyle. Prefer online shopping? Saks.com offers a curated selection tailored to your taste. From new arrivals by your favorite designers like Prada jackets and Gucci loafers to stylish pieces for your everyday needs. Whether it's date night, a vacation, a special occasion, or just lounging in style, Saks helps you find the perfect look for every occasion. If you want shopping to be fun and easy, then head to Saks Fifth Avenue for inspiring ways to elevate your personal style every day. The administration is basing a lot of its claims and recommendation on an August study that was published in the journal BMC Environmental Health. And I want to be really clear on what this review actually says. Can you lay that out for us?
So this was not a new study of people. This was a study essentially of past studies, a scoping review, as one person put it to me. And what the researchers who are well regarded, and this study was seen as legitimate by people who are not in the Trump administration, what this study found was a pattern, it said, of association between Tylenol consumption during pregnancy and the possibility of autism or ADHD in children later, like a signal in the noise. This is not the first time that this question has been explored. Past studies had not found a connection between Tylenol and autism. And really, it's not just Tylenol, it's the key ingredient, acetaminophen, in Tylenol, which is used around the world, not just in the US, and called other things besides Tylenol. But these researchers about a month ago came out with this study raising new questions, not saying confirmed a causation effect. It's possible that it's not the Tylenol that is causing the autism. We know that fevers in pregnant women can lead to neurological deficit in the children. So maybe it's not the Tylenol that these women are taking, it's the fever that they had, that they were taking the Tylenol for, that caused the autism. Either way, this caught fire in the Make America Healthy Again movement, which supports Robert F. Kennedy Jr. There were MAGA supporters of President Trump who cottoned onto it too, people like Laura Loomer. And by this month, when it broke into mainstream news and the Wall Street Journal said that the Trump administration was looking at this study, I think, Lizzie, it kind of took on a life of its own and very conveniently came at a time when the Trump administration wanted to show that they'd made progress in understanding autism.
Let's be clear. What does the most up-to-date research say on risk factors for autism and neurodivergence? Well,
the key belief, Lizzie, is that a lot of this is genetic, that there are genes that have been linked to the prevalence of autism in children, and that there may well be environmental factors, like, as we talked about, fever in the pregnant mother. There might be some exposures, but the vast majority of researchers believe it's largely genetic. They're not ruling out the possibility of other causes, and the fact that autism rates in America have risen so much is worthy of concern and note. But some of that, if not much of that, is because the diagnosis of autism has gotten better. There has been more recognition of the condition. The definition of it is somewhat expanded over the years. So when President Trump talks about the rise from maybe 1 in 150 children to 1 in 31 children, as of the most recent federal data, quite a bit of that is likely driven by doctors, medical professionals knowing to look for it now in a way that maybe some decades ago they did not.
What about, and I might be butchering this, so apologies, leucovorin, which the administration is hailing as a treatment?
I had not pronounced the word leucovorin until we broke the story about the Trump administration coming out with its announcements on Tylenol and leucovorin. So I think you and I are in the same boat. But it's kind of similar and inverted from the Tylenol story. Here we have a drug, leucovorin, that has been used in the past by, for example, cancer patients who might be taking it because they have side effects from the other medicines they're on. And leucovorin delivers crucial nutrients, vitamin B9.
It's folic acid, right? I mean, which I took during pregnancy.
Yeah. People already take it. There's little harm in taking it. There might even be positive effects. And my colleague at the Post, Ariana Cha, had a great story this week about some of those early studies and some of the medical professionals and families who have seen real progress in autistic children who have taken leucovorin and seem to have better understanding of communication. They can express themselves better, real breakthroughs. But those anecdotal examples and these limited studies are, again, not what you would normally see launching a White House announcement. These things are carefully choreographed usually. In my years covering several administrations, you can kind of see the march over months, if not years, of researchers say, here's what we're working on. We're going to put out a federal proposed rule. We'll put out a federal final rule. Or here's the big clinical study that FDA is looking at. It's very, very rare, if not, again, not sure I've seen this, and even outside the pandemic, to see something go so quickly from a few reports recently to the president trumpeting it.
Well, so all of that is leading me to this question. Why make this pretty stark announcement, and why make it now?
I think a lot of it has to do with who President Trump is and what he believes. And it's not just about 2025, it's about 2 decades ago when President Trump, then a real estate developer, came to the conclusion that autism was being caused by vaccines. This has been debunked. There had been some discredited research that was circulating several decades ago, but President Trump came to either believe it or entertain the thought. And he and Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who at the time was an environmental activist, who was inveighing against the dangers of big industry and came to also believe that pharma was behind the autism problem in America, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. had emerged as a major anti-vaccine activist, and the two of them linked up. President Trump alluded to this in his remarks on Monday, saying, I've been waiting 20 years for this moment. So for a long time, he has wanted to raise questions about autism, point to possible causes, even use discredited research to do that. In his first administration, he was largely blocked. He had people around him, outside advisors, who were able to get in the way of him working with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. But in the second administration, he is unburdened. He is unfiltered, and he is doing many of the things that in prior years he wasn't able to. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is urging him along on that as someone who has bought into a number of discredited theories about health well beyond autism and vaccines and potentially Tylenol.
Why is Trump so fixated on this? I mean, you mentioned discredited research. Was there some inciting incident for Trump? Like, what do we know about his particular fixation? Because that doesn't feel like too strong a word to use here.
No, I think it's right. And he has talked in various ways about the personal experiences he has had, talked about people who are close to him who had their children vaccinated and then, in Trump's telling, developed autism or had other injuries. He spoke a little bit this week about a woman who he said worked at Trump Tower who had a son who she said was fatally injured by a vaccine. So he has rested on these largely anonymous stories of people close to him. And it is true that sometimes vaccines do lead to injuries and side effects. That is absolutely true. But the large-scale pattern of vaccines causing autism has been ruled out repeatedly. And despite that, Trump keeps coming back to it. And even as he says he's a believer in vaccines, he is saying things from the biggest bully pulpit in the land that are very anti-vaccine.
What about RFK Jr.? When did he become so interested in autism as an issue?
You know, credit to one of my colleagues at the New York Times, Cheryl Gay Stolberg, who I remember wrote a very good story on this, that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was approached by, I believe, mothers who said that vaccines had injured their children, led to autistic behavior. Initially, RFK Jr. didn't want to engage with that, but then was brought on board and then came to firmly believe it. He then sought out, using his Kennedy name, briefings with people like Tony Fauci and Francis Collins well before those scientific researchers became household names during the pandemic. This was, again, about 20 years ago. But RFK Jr. was rebuffed repeatedly. And in his mind, being turned away and told that this wasn't true was only more evidence for the major conspiracy that it was true. And he and his group, Children's Health Defense, really have been leaders in advancing theories about the risks of vaccines over the past couple of decades.
You know, both men, the president and RFK Jr., come from this sort of celebrity world, significant scandal, and strong belief in fringe theories. And I wonder how much that shared approach and shared worldview kind of led them to this place together.
A couple of weeks ago, Lizzie, I did a story at the Post about RFK Jr.'s backing by Trump. Even as many Americans raised questions about RFK Jr. and his claims, Republican senators have gotten upset with some of RFK Jr.'s efforts to roll back vaccine access. The president has been stalwart, essentially, in telling RFK Jr., go ahead and go wild on health and medicine, just as he promised last year. He has stuck to that. And I do think some of that is because of their kinship. I talked to people like Steve Bannon, who helped broker the connection between President Trump and RFK Jr., and Bannon pointed out their commonalities, that RFK Jr. is someone who has followed a relatively similar path to Trump, at least more similar than other people in his cabinet. You know, you have two men of very similar ages, similar celebrity lifestyles, similar scandals, so that's not something that Bannon necessarily pointed out, but both of them have accusations against them about bad behavior. And there is, in some sense, for Trump, victory in having a Kennedy working for him. This is the most famous name in Democratic politics of the past century, essentially. And you have a scion of that family now working for a Republican president, which is deeply embarrassing to some of the Kennedys that I've talked to, but a win for President Trump. And he loves to tout that and brag about that. And I've also talked to people in the White House and around the administration who say RFK Jr. just has a lot of leeway in ways that other cabinet secretaries who are much more low profile would not.
When we come back, a healthcare policy based not on evidence, but on vibes. How many software as a service applications are being used at your company right now? Can't keep count? You're not alone. Trellica by 1Password helps you discover and secure access to all of your software as a service apps, even unmanaged shadow IT. Trellica by 1Password inventories every app in use at your company. Then the app pre-populates profiles to assess risk, letting you manage access, optimize spend, and enforce security best practices across every app your employees use. Manage shadow IT, securely onboard and offboard employees, and meet compliance goals. 1Password exceeds the standards set by various authorities and is a leader in security. Take the first step to better security for your team by securing credentials and protecting every application, even unmanaged shadow IT. Learn more at onepassword.com/TBD. That's onepassword.com/TBD, all lowercase.
Raise the rudders! Raise the sails! Raise the sails!
Captain, an unidentified ship is approaching. Over.
Roger. Wait, is that an enterprise sales solution?
Reach sales professionals, not professional sailors. With LinkedIn ads, you can target the right people by industry, job title, and more. Start converting your B2B audience today. Spend $250 on your first campaign and get a free $250 credit for the next one. Get started today at linkedin.com/campaign. Terms and conditions apply.
When did making plans get this complicated? It's time to streamline with WhatsApp, the secure messaging app that brings the whole group together. Use polls to settle dinner plans. Send event invites and pin messages so no one forgets Mom's 60th. And never miss a meme or milestone. All protected with end-to-end encryption. It's time for WhatsApp. Message privately with everyone. Learn more at whatsapp.com.
You know, I think it's probably worth saying that they both use words like crisis and epidemic. And not only are those words quite offensive to many people on the autism spectrum, But they also seem like a pretty significant misreading of the data. They seem to be focusing on what's sometimes called high support needs autism or profound autism, and yet not looking at the larger picture of, a very wide spectrum of neurodifferences.
Spectrum being the key word. I mean, we talk about autism spectrum disorder. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. earlier this year gave some remarks on autism that were deeply offensive to a lot of people, not just in the autistic community, but where he talked about the severe limitations that being autistic bring with it.
Autism destroys families. More importantly, it destroys our greatest resource, which are our children. And these are kids who will never pay taxes. They'll never hold a job. They'll never play baseball. They'll never write a poem. They'll never go out on a date.
And the picture that he painted of people who can't function on their own, who can't go to the bathroom on their own, who can't hold jobs, have romantic lives, that's alien to a lot of people who are autistic, who function perfectly well in society. They might interpret information somewhat differently. They might see the world in a unique way. But some of those people, and I've talked to them, they don't see anything wrong. They see a gift. They don't want to be changed. I think the key distinction is people who have severe autism or the parents who are caring for children who are severely autistic. Those individuals may really need the intervention and treatment and the hope that could be offered by something like leucovorin. But even folks in those communities are worried that the expedited rush by the U.S. government it could be a setback, that rather than have a very serious approach to something like leucovorin and figure out whether it works or not, there are going to be people pinning their hope on it and then finding in weeks, months, years, it didn't do what President Trump suggested it would.
It's interesting. This announcement did also come with some money for research. When you kind of peel away some of the press conference layers, there is some funding here for research into high support needs autism. And that's kind of fascinating to me, where you have this incredibly misleading statement coming from the President of the United States, but then also maybe some legitimate research funding underneath that.
Lizzie, my understanding is that those studies and that research at the National Institutes of Health is following a legitimate process. It is very different than the rushed announcements on Tylenol and leucovorin. Over this year, the teams at the NIH have been pursuing grant making, essentially, issuing funding for teams around the country to work on autism research. And there is a bigger report that the NIH is undertaking. That was initially supposed to be like the centerpiece of the Trump administration's autism effort. But I think what may have happened is that report was going too slowly for the desire of President Trump, who's wanted to get a quick win. We saw this during the pandemic, too. He is a guy who looks for silver bullets, whether it's ivermectin, whether it's the potential of bleach to fight the virus, and now the potential of Tylenol as a cause or leucovorin as a treatment of autism. So to be able to trumpet something quickly, that's the president's style. It is not the slow process of NIH researchers and their colleagues going through what's known about autism and whether they can slowly make the progress in finding new solutions.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I was going to ask you next, because RFK Jr. had said he was going to find a cause for autism by September. Well, here we are. It's, late September. I don't know. Did they just feel like they had to say something to satisfy their base?
I had reported back, I think it was early April, that the NIH was embarking on this research. It was before RFK Jr. made his comments. And at the time, people were telling me, yeah, the NIH is getting itself together. It's spinning up the process, but the research is not going to start until September. Then a few days later, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. in this televised cabinet meeting vows to President Trump that we're going to find answers by September. And we'll know not just, the causes, but we'll be able to start treating this. So I do think that once that political promise was made, and President Trump is someone who has believed for a long time that career health experts don't always know what they're talking about. They told him you couldn't do a vaccine in a year at the beginning of the coronavirus pandemic. They were wrong. Trump was right. In this case, I think Trump and RFK Jr. and others really did want to put points on the board. So along comes a month ago this study on Tylenol as a potential cause of autism, and it arrives at the right time for the White House and its deputies looking for a quick win. And I think that NIH report is still some ways away, and it may come to a very different conclusion on Tylenol and leucovorin and some of the other theories around autism.
It's also kind of fascinating to see them lean on a study by a group of researchers to validate their claims after spending so much time denigrating science and the scientific process. How do you square those things?
Well, as one White House official told me a few weeks ago when I was talking to them about this Tylenol study from Harvard researchers, he said, now we're going to trust Harvard after spending all year running down Harvard. So I think it's more about the convenience of the study and less about who did it or the process.
What kind of response have we seen from Kenvue, which is the maker of Tylenol, spun off from Johnson & Johnson?
Kenvue has reiterated up and down that there is no proven connection between their drug and autism, that other studies have ruled it out. Kenvue in recent weeks, after it became clear that the Trump administration was looking at this study, did try to staff up quickly with some more DC lobbyists and policy shops. Unfortunately for them, it didn't seem to work out in their favor. We still got that big announcement on Monday. And that clip, which is, live forever, of the president of the United States saying, don't take Tylenol. And even if lots and lots of researchers knock that down, even if there is going to be litigation or something in the future, there are going to be some Americans who will come back to that and believe once that idea is out there, the president is saying, don't take this drug. I'm sure there will be people who listen to that.
I mean, I feel like I have to reiterate, as someone who has been pregnant, there are so few options when you are pregnant of things that are considered safe that you can take. I remember white-knuckling my way through a terrible migraine with half a cup of coffee and some ice cubes and Tylenol. And it is very hard to read this announcement and not think, oh, well, this is punishing mothers while also blaming them if their child is neurodiverse.
What's really disturbing is there aren't many options, if any options, after Tylenol. It is the go-to for women in pregnancy. Advil has been warned against because of risk to the fetus. That is far more proven than any connection between Tylenol and autism. Other pain relievers like ibuprofen or Aleve, maybe you can take them at some points in your pregnancy, but there are risks with them too, and you should consult a doctor for all of this. I mean, the existing literature has been try not to take more Tylenol or really any medication during pregnancy than if you need it. But as the head of ACOG, the leading OBGYN group, has said in a statement this week, the downside of not taking Tylenol for women who need it is known and riskier than taking Tylenol. So I hear you, Lizzie, and I think that is the deep fear that for women who might need Tylenol, who might need it to control their fever, if they don't take it and that fever then leads to neurological problems in the child later, what have we really gotten this week other than misinformation and harm?
It's worth noting that we are not that far out from another era of autism misinformation. For decades, doctors and researchers blamed emotionally cold women, so-called refrigerator mothers, for their children's neurodivergence. That idea persisted well into the 1970s. Today, most major medical institutions embrace a much more multifaceted and nuanced view. Indeed, the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists said Monday's announcement was, quote, not backed by the full body of scientific evidence and dangerously simplifies the many and complex causes of neurological challenges in children. I asked Dan whether we've entered an era in which most major medical associations and the most powerful person in the world are just saying totally different things.
I think you kind of answered your own question. Yeah. I think we're seeing this not just with acetaminophen. It's more broad. We have seen this with vaccines in recent weeks, where the federal government is starting to move to limit, say, coronavirus vaccines. And then there are collectives of states around the country that are keeping the old recommendations on coronavirus vaccines or getting ready to issue their own vaccine recommendations because they're prepared for the RFK Jr.-led health department to take more steps to rein in vaccines. It's like a civil war in healthcare, in medicine. And this Tylenol dust-up is just the latest battlefront.
You know, so many people in the autism community, people with autism, parents, researchers, doctors, have been horrified by this announcement, not just because it pathologizes people with autism, but also because it feels like it could have a very profound effect on what future research gets amplified, gets funded, and kind of, you know, what happens 5, 10, 20 years from now.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it is worth noting and reiterating, there are people who got very excited about the president's announcement on Monday because they are desperate for answers. They are stressed about their child's severe autism. They're just looking for information and help and hope that it is coming. But many others feel that this process has undermined what could be much more serious and sober, and that the federal government, the power of it to compel new research and uncover answers would have been better served in following a more traditional scientific process rather than short-circuiting it.
I have been pregnant, Dan. I know you have kids. It's an extremely vulnerable, confusing, difficult time for people, while also a joyous one. And I wonder, like, what do? You're pregnant, or your partner is, and you just like don't know what to make of all of this. How do you navigate it?
Well, as much as I respect you, and I think I'm a decent reporter, I still would urge people not to listen to podcasters and go talk to a physician. Everybody's individual case is different. My wife had a pair of relatively high-risk pregnancies. I think that the need for medication is largely driven by the mother's situation. And that goes well beyond Tylenol. So I don't think that any blanket statement issued by the President of the United States relying on his gut should guide any medical behavior. I do think there is a point to don't take medication you don't need during pregnancy because we know how fragile the fetus can be. But it is scary. We've lived through that. You've lived through that. So I'm astounded for all the wrong ways about what happened this week. And I worry about what that will mean for the pregnant moms, for their kids, for everyone else who needs good health information and not riffs from the White House podium about what to do when making medical decisions.
Dan Diamond, as always, I appreciate you coming on.
I'm glad to be back. I just wish it was about something happier.
Dan Diamond is the White House correspondent for The Washington Post. All right, that is it for our show today. What Next TBD is produced by Patrick Fort and Shayna Roth. Our show is edited by Evan Campbell. Paige Osborne is the senior supervising producer for What Next and What Next TBD. Mia Lobel is the executive producer here at Slate. And TBD is part of the larger What Next family. And if you're looking for more Slate content to listen to, check out Thursday's episode of What Next. It is a fascinating interview with Karen Attia, an award-winning opinion journalist who was fired from The Washington Post for social media posts about Charlie Kirk and America's gun violence problem. We will be back on Sunday with another episode about the dangers baked into Tesla's door design. I am Lizzie O'Leary. Thank you so much for listening.
For a limited time at McDonald's, get a Big Mac Extra Value Meal for $8. That means 2 all-beef patties, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, pickles, onions on a sesame seed bun, and medium fries, and a drink. We may need to change that jingle.
Prices and participation may vary. Every minute your finance team spends wrestling with data is a minute lost. Insight Software's AI-powered insights instantly move you from complexity to clarity. Automated analysis, real-time reporting, strategic recommendations, all at your fingertips. Transform how your finance team works and watch your business grow. Stop wasting time. Start making smarter decisions. Learn more at insightsoftware.com/AI.